Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second Up Your Impact podcast. I'm joined by Alisa Murphy. She began her career as a professional actor after training at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art before taking an unconventional turn into business and entrepreneurship. In her mid-20s, she moved into the clean energy sector, becoming CEO of a climate tech startup at the age of 25. Amazing. She went on to found Life Size Media, a climate tech communications agency that she grew and scaled across Europe over a 15-year period. During that time, Alisa worked with hundreds of impact-driven startups, founders, and leadership teams operating at the intersection of climate technology and storytelling. In 2023, she sold Life Size Media to her team, pioneering an alternative ownership model designed to protect the company's value and long-term mission. She now serves as chair of the board. Today, Alisa works with post-corporate professionals who want to build meaningful, sustainable businesses of their own. She is the creator of the Meaningful Business Incubator, a 6-month program supporting people to design, test, and launch work aligned with both purpose and financial reality. She is also the host of the From Corporate into Calling podcast. Alisa lives in Essex with her husband, 3 kids, and a Cocker Spaniel. Hi, Alisa. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to have a great conversation about how individuals can start to think more about ecosystems to create impact.
Beautiful. Thank you, Courtney, for inviting me and for having me here on your second ever conversation and for that lovely introduction. It's always nice to sit back and hear your story told by someone else.
It's been a wonderful journey you've been on. Tell me a little bit about, your most impactful moments in your own career.
The phrase that I would use to define it is perhaps the road less traveled. And I like that because I think it can be really encouraging to people. Something that I often see, particularly people who are coming out of corporate, is that they have this sort of obsession with linear, rational, sensible careers. And they sort of expect, that they had this path that was laid out to them, usually by someone else from an early age. And they've been good girls and boys and they've ticked all the boxes and they've achieved all the things and gone to all the right places. And then when they get to the point of thinking, maybe this is not really it for me, maybe there's something more that I want, or it doesn't feel right to me in some ways, it becomes really frightening and destabilizing because they're not used to doing things that are unexpected. They're not used to kind of twists and turns. Like for me, my entire career has been twists and turns, embracing the unexpected, and which is not to say it was always easy for me. It took me a long time to get to the point of acceptance where I would, happily hear the story in the way that you shared it in the introduction. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone that I had been an actor. That was like absolutely top secret. It took me a while to realize that actually all of those kind of seemingly disparate parts coming together is my strength and is what has made me be able to, being an actor is what allowed me to, on my first day when I was 25, chair a meeting with the Department of Energy and Climate Change and some major oil and gas companies when I really had no idea what I was doing because I just kind of acted my way through it. And, I've often been in situations where I've done like public speaking and people saying, oh, how do you do that? How do you seem to remember everything and deliver it? And it's like, well, okay, because that's actually what I'm trained in. And I think, all the pieces come together. So you mentioned ecosystem. I guess I'm a big fan of disparate parts of your story or disparate parts of who you are, the whole wonderful diverse collage of it coming together to make something that's really vibrant and resilient and of value to people. I think that's far more interesting than homogenized path traditionally we have believed we've had to follow.
I too have had a wavy career journey. I'm actually a horticulturalist by training, so I spent the first
that's my dream job
10 years of my career in horticulture. And when I teach at the University of Exeter, I often give a lecture about the importance of having a wavy career so that you're future-proofing. So why don't we dive in with a couple questions? As a regenerative coach and a business mentor, you've spoken to lots of people about the journey to creating an impactful career. What's the one thing that comes up frequently?
I'll start with the thing that surprises me the most, because I get to speak to people who on paper have done it all, are hugely successful, have all the big names behind them, are in extremely senior positions. On paper, it's incredibly impressive. And what always surprises me is how much those people underestimate their own abilities. I personally believe this comes from being part of a big machinery and feeling like, oh, it's not me doing those things. It's kind of, yes, I've played my role. I've I've done my part, but I'm part of this kind of much bigger machinery. And I often hear sort of people saying, well, I'm great at delivering on someone else's vision, or if someone sets me targets, I'm going to nail them. Like, I will find a way to get it done. But then it feels very, very different to think, well, could I be the one having the vision? Could I be the one going, look, I see a problem over here. I believe that we can develop a solution. Can I be the risk taker, the initiator? I think that's a really big psychological nervous system shift for people to take. And actually what it shows up is people kind of going, I don't think I've got the right skills and experience. And I almost kind of have to laugh because I'm like, look at your CV, look at the things that you've done. And it's really this kind of blocker that I think people put in their own way of feeling like, well, but I don't know how to translate that from doing that within, let's say like big tech or corporate America. And how do I take that and do that in regenerative agriculture or whatever the field might be? So part of my job is helping them to translate that. But actually it starts with personal aspect, which is, as I said, having the belief that you have a right to do that you're capable of doing that, you can come up with something for yourself, believe in it, have a dream, and make that into reality. But it's a big shift to go from being a highly effective kind of tool within the machinery of corporate to being a kind of a visionary and an entrepreneur.
I can see that. I appreciate that. What's the second thing that comes up frequently?
It's going to relate into what we're going to come on to talk about in more detail of this idea of building an ecosystem. It's very strongly ingrained in people that the safest place is in a corporate job with salary, and that anything else that you might consider is unsafe. It's taking a risk. I think we just also have to look at what has been happening, even if we look in recent months, the scale of mass layoff happening, the shift, whether or not it's real or an excuse, the idea that AI is going to take all these jobs and we can do huge downsizing. I hear story after story of entire departments that have just disappeared overnight. People who have given 10, 15 years of loyalty who get a text at 3:00 in the morning. So I think we really need to question this idea. Safe, that is the most sensible choice. And perhaps I'm coming at this from a biased perspective because I've pretty much never worked for anybody else. So I'm used to always being in that position of having to make it work for myself. But I feel much safer because I know I can do that. I'm not reliant on somebody else to pay my bills. I think it's safe as long as it's working. I suppose that's the way I would put it. To me, the safest place is like when you are creating value for yourself, when you are creating your ecosystem, your work environment.
How do individuals create ecosystems so that they can find work, but also, most importantly, build a community around them to support them and to help them grow and continue to challenge their thinking?
I like the way that you're kind of thinking of this in broader terms, that it's also about how you become part of an ecosystem and surround yourselves with the right people. And that is probably one of the more challenging aspects. A lot of people find that it feels very lonely because they've kind of had to stick their neck out. They're going against what sometimes their culture or their families or even their friends, like people who love them, just going, why are you doing this? Like, why would you leave that job? Aren't you scared it's never going to work? And that's really difficult to swim in the opposite direction with that feeling around you. So I absolutely agree with you. I think that community is really important. And when I talk about ecosystem, I really root that in nature, in a very literal nature definition of how we think about ecosystem. To me, it's very much tied hand in hand with resilience. So if you look at a healthy ecosystem, I'm not going to pretend to be a biologist here, but surface level, you're talking about a lot of different plant life species, a lot of different variety, diversity working together. And that is what makes an ecosystem resilient. Because, if you get pests or invasive species that cause problems, that's going to affect some of that life there, but others are going to thrive. And there's this sort of ability that it sort of ebbs and flows, and different species will thrive at different times, but there's kind of a lot of options, there's a lot of variety, and that creates a lot of resilience. The way we've been taught to think of our careers, kind of monocrop, just huge areas of one crop. And I mean, maybe that works for a while and you get high yield and it seems quite efficient, but the wrong disease comes in and it's just completely wiped out. So for me, it's like really grounding in that sense of how nature shows us that ecosystems can be really resilient and built for the long term. That's another aspect that I think is really important, is thinking about creating a work life that is going to support you, not just next year or the year after, but for years and years to come. Work that you can potentially do right into older age. Work where the kind of idea of like, I've just got to make it through to retirement doesn't even exist for you, because symbiotic with the rest of your life. It supports you, it enlivens you. It's something that you want to keep doing. So it's thinking about how can different strands of work support each other? How can they ebb and flow? And this is how we protect ourselves from the capriciousness of the market, different offerings that can come to the fore at different times. And we can, let one take up more space for a while and then maybe take a back seat for a while. Again, I find that like to be a really resilient model. With the community aspect, I think it's really about rooting, isn't it? And grounding, and having that kind of the way the roots of trees intermingle, or the mycelium network connecting in. So it's not just individualism of you out there on your own, taking all of the responsibility, all of the burden. To get really practical, one of the things that I recommend is building your bench really early. Often if you've been in a corporate setting, you've had that there's a hierarchy and a management structure that has support you. It's probably been very frustrating at times. It kind of holds you in some degree. And when you're out there on your own, you don't have that at all. I know that from my own experience. When I founded my company, for many, many years, I didn't have investors. I didn't have a board of directors. The buck stopped with me. Everything kind of fell on my shoulders. And there are some advantages, but that can be really hard and can be really lonely. And something I wish I had done earlier was just surround myself with people who I knew I could just pick up the phone to if I needed to. And it doesn't need to be a formalized structure.
The concept of building a bench. I myself have a long-term bench. My little network of supporters has been an enormous help to me throughout the duration of my career, really. Let's get really practical. How do you advise your clients to step away? Where should they start?
I'm the sort of person who would just walk out the door. I'm the kind of person who would just it would be some kind of dramatic exit and it would be over and I would have zero plan. And I think there's a handful of people for whom that works. But for most people, that's not going to do it. That's going to be just complete nervous system overload. A really smart idea to build yourself a plan in the way that you would if you had a startup, and thinking about having a runway. So thinking, what resources do I have? Do I have, a certain amount of savings put aside? Or am I going to get some kind of negotiation with the company that is going to fund me for a certain amount of time? How long have I got? Think about kind of your runway. So getting, as you said, really practical here. So often with my clients, I'm thinking about what kind of financial exposure is acceptable to them and how much are they willing to invest in this transition to the next stage. And when that kind of gives you a timeline, then you can think within that, well, what are the milestones I'm going to need to see to know that I'm moving in the right direction? And of course, not everybody is in that position that, they do have, say, a year's worth of savings that they can live off. And in that case, thinking about your different options, how you're going to pay your bills in that time. I often talk about bridging jobs or bridging work. So not trying to expect that you're going to leave corporate and tomorrow you're going to start out in completely values aligned, fulfilling work that's exactly in the direction you want to go, where you're going to launch your new business overnight and it's going to be up and running within a couple of months. That's not realistic. So it's just thinking about this kind of transition period in quite a clear-eyed way. Where is the money going to come from? Sometimes people will even consult for their previous employer or reduce their hours, and then that gives them time to explore other things. So really thinking of that transition plan, and also thinking of some of the things that might be holding you back. I have one client who is in the States who worked in big tech. The big blocker for her was healthcare. Really difficult for her to think of not having the healthcare that she had through her employer. So one of the things that we spent some time doing was helping to research for her so she could find alternatives. And then she came up with 2 or 3 alternatives that she felt good about, she knew she could afford. And suddenly things really unlocked for her. And I think also, if you possibly can, to try and give yourself some space, like I say, not to think that you can jump out and just go straight into the work overnight, that there is a necessary period of recovery. You may have experienced that yourself, Courtney, of, you kind of need to detox for a while and find who you are without that role, without that title, without that brand, and do some rediscovery. I know I did. It took me a long time to know who I was when I wasn't CEO and founder. So I think that's a really important component.
It's the one thing that I struggled with, the corporate identity. Even now, I left Unilever quite a few years ago. Sometimes when I meet old colleagues from different partners that we used to work with, they still introduce me as Courtney from Unilever. And I'm like, wait a second, no, you affiliate yourself with a brand. I needed about 3 months to figure out what my brand was going to be. What did I want to be known for? What did I want people to think when I walked in the room that was noticeably different from what it was in years past when I did work for large corporations?
And that means allowing yourself to reconnect with things that you've pushed aside, or, that are somewhere like at the back dusty corner of the attic of your subconscious. What are the things that you dreamt of that you just decided you actually couldn't do? What were the things that you loved that you just kept putting off? What are the things that you feel really passionately about but you think aren't ever going to make sense in a work context, and really making space for all of those?
That is exactly what I did. I have a portfolio career because I do quite a few different things. My passion project really is helping people to be more sustainable at home. And it's something that I've been wanting to work on for many, many years. And I couldn't do it in the corporates that I was employed at because they weren't willing to talk to consumers about sustainable use of products in the way that they should have been. There are so many options for earning and creating impact at various stages in your career. Everything from freelancing to short or long-term contract work, fractional roles, and like myself having more of a portfolio of projects. How do you recommend that people find these opportunities and know which type of opportunity is right for them?
There are 4 aspects of it. So I kind of work on this framework with clients. So the first one picks up on your previous point. You have to know your why. You have to know what it is that gets you up in the morning, what you care about enough that you are willing to build a business or a career around, and that you're going to show up for day after day, year after year, even when it gets hard. To me, it's not about having some perfect articulation around that or some sort of vision statement. It's what is true for you, how much you can embody that when it's something that just really resonates for you. That's the fuel that is going to keep you going. Then I think you need to think about how you want work to feel and how you want it to relate to the rest of your life. And I think this is a question that most of us never ask. We just sort of assume that you're going to get given the answer to that. Really recommend that people take time to think about what other things does your work need to make space for? What are your non-negotiables? And this will depend a lot about the different stage of life that you're in. Throughout my late 20s and 30s, I worked all of the time. Work was kind of all consuming. I loved it and I don't regret it. I was in a stage of life when I could just completely pour myself into it. But I'm now in my early 40s. I have 3 young kids. My priority is to be at school pickup and do bedtimes and take them to play dates and make their lunches and all the, the boring things. But I don't want to be working 14-hour days. I don't want to be traveling very often. So my work is shaped by that how of I need it to fit into actually quite a limited number of hours within the week. I want to be able to take school holidays off so I can be there with my kids and have that time. I need a certain amount of flexibility because they're kids and stuff happens all the time and someone's sick or, you never know what's going to happen. So that really shapes what I then go on to choose, but also how you want it to feel. Some people want to feel energized by work, or they want it to be like really adventurous and exciting. Other people want it to feel calm and aligned and just peaceful. So it's really worth spending some time on that, straight into the what. So then we come to the what you're going to do, which is already 3 questions in. So you can see this is a little bit different. Most time people go straight to the what and they haven't thought about the why and the how. I recommend thinking of this in a very non-CV sense. Really encourage yourself not to use the language of previous job titles and, what makes sense to a recruiter, and kind of let go of that and try to get to the core of what is it that you're really good at? What can you do that a lot of other people can't? And this is how you get to that translating piece of translating your previous skills and experience into what you're going to do for people. So I had a client who worked with very big teams and very disparate teams inside of a corporate. She worked literally in a translation role between 2 languages, but she also did a lot of translating between different functions within the organization. So one of the things she was pulled on is, hold on a minute, we need marketing to work with the software team on doing this thing in Spanish. Can you make that happen? She was the glue that kind of pulled that all together and found a way to talk everyone's different languages. So she wanted to move into regenerative agriculture. That was so helpful when she understood that, because then she could translate that into thinking, well, what I can do is I can translate for people. I can help farmers do heavyweight complex finance applications, which is completely outside of their comfort zone, because I can translate and I can get groups in California to work with groups in Brazil because I know how to make those connections. So you can see how getting to the core of what you can do that is really valuable and stripping away all the kind of corporate language is actually how you find what the thing is that you can translate from your previous experience into the new work you want to do. And then the final piece of this is, who are you going to do it for? So this is when you're finding your niche and you're finding your audience, which is, I'm such a big believer in this. I think the broader you are, the more generalized you are, the less visible you are. It's so much harder to actually make impact and get traction if I'm here open to do whatever comes my way. I'll do anything for everyone. I really think that is a weak position to put yourself in. And I think if you can know specifically who you want to do that thing that you're really good at for, who urgently needs what you have to offer and has the resources to pay for it. Those are the two questions to ask yourself. It needs to be an urgent need and they need to have the resources. Otherwise, you're never going to have a financially resilient business. And then you talk directly to those people. So I think that the answer to your question of which of those different formats does it take comes at the end of that process. And also in terms of what you asked about, well, how do you also then find the opportunities, right? It's great if you know you've got your framework, you know exactly what you're doing. But I also believe the more clarity you have, the easier it is to find those opportunities, because otherwise you're just looking at this kind of huge blank sheet of paper. And what this is, I see this very often with people of them, this friend at this company said, maybe I could do this. And then I also thought maybe I should apply for that job because that probably does really fit, but I'm really interested in doing this nonprofit work over here. And people are just scattered and pulled in all kinds of directions. When I do this thing and I do it for these people, the opportunity selection becomes so much more clear. And very often I think you will find that opportunities come your way because you've set up your shop and you've said very clearly, this is what I believe in. This is what I want to do. And people will find you.
Fantastic advice. Maybe to wrap up the questions, one final sentence from you.
Courage and faith. That is my sentence. It takes a lot of courage to leave corporate, and it takes a lot of faith to build work on your own terms. So however you can find those things and hold on to them, they are going to be your best friends and your biggest cheerleaders and what makes this a reality for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for such insightful and practical advice and guidance. I know that all the listeners are going to really appreciate it as much as I did.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Courtney.